You can be seated. So last week, if you were here, then you would have heard an invitation. You would have heard an invitation to draw near to God. This invitation has come after a long journey and much preparation. Drawing near to God was the whole point of everything we have seen. Through the story of Israel, through all the stories of people struggling to follow God, through slavery and rescue, through instructions at Mount Sinai, through the wilderness journey, and at the border of the Promised Land, the whole point has been to draw near to God. And as we've been going through Hebrews, the whole message of Hebrews is draw near to God. God made a way for the Israelites to draw near to him through the tabernacle, but it was temporary. And now we have the final and perfect way to draw near to God, and it is the way of Jesus. It is through Jesus that we can finally and fully draw near to God. His perfect human life, his perfect sacrifice, and his resurrection have given us new life. And it is only in this new life through Christ that we can draw near to God. And this is the deep desire of every human person. This is the desire of every heart, whether they know it or not, whether you know it or not. It is to be near to our Creator. It is in his presence that we find complete satisfaction. In the light of his glory, we are able to know who we truly are and how good God truly is. And there will come a day when we will all have this experience in its fullness. Until then, we're still on a journey. But it is a journey during which we can increasingly experience new life in Christ. This is the purpose of obedience. This is why we obey the teachings of Christ, not in order to become saved, not to earn something for ourselves, but living out our salvation, living out what God has done for us as new people, becoming increasingly like Christ in our thoughts and our desires and our behaviors. Last week I said that drawing near to God in this life will require faith. And this morning we'll look at in more detail what this faith means. And so you can, if you have a Bible, and I hope you do, or you can grab one from the pew, you can turn to Hebrews chapter 11, which is known as the famous faith chapter, or the Hall of Faith. It features many examples of people who have gone before us, who are considered to be faithful. And it's good to learn about the faithful people who have gone before us. I like to read biographies and memoirs of people who have gone through some of the things that maybe I'm going through right now, or maybe that I will go through. One of the more recent ones that I read is the biography of Eugene Peterson, who is most well known as the author of the Message translation of the Bible. But Eugene Peterson was a pastor for 29 years. He planted a church in the east coast of the U.S., and he stayed at that church until he retired from being a pastor, and he went on to teach at Regent College in Vancouver, and while he was there, he was translating the entire Bible into contemporary English. And he also published several books for pastors over the course of his life, and I've read many of those books. They've been very helpful. But he writes as one who has traveled the journey of being a pastor, not just as one who has simply had ideas about the journey. He's a practitioner, not a theorist. He lived it. There's a big difference between someone who knows about something and someone who has really experienced it. When I'm struggling through something, I prefer to learn from people who have gone through those same struggles and have made it through. Perhaps not unscathed, but they've made it. And a key difference between someone who has practiced something and someone who has only speculated or learned about something is that the practitioners write or speak not with ideologies or ideas of how to do things perfectly, but with a grounding realism. It's like when people come fresh out of college, and I imagine for some of you who are in trades, people who come straight out of trade school and they come on the job site for the first time and they start to learn what the work is really about. It's not all what they learned in the classroom. And isn't it funny when these fresh out of college people come and tell you how to do your job? Well, give it some time and maybe you won't have such perfect ideas. Someone can have all sorts of ideas about how to do something, but until they've actually tried out those ideas and failed and had to improvise and had to change the way they're doing things, they don't really know whether their ideas will really work. A former boss of mine, the former president of our denomination, he would always say that a plan never survives its collision with reality. And this is true, especially in our work. But it's also true in our faith. Hebrews 11 reminds us that others have gone before us, and they've traveled the road of faith and are considered among the faithful, even though none of them lived it perfectly. And we can have confidence in God because of the witness of these people. And so I'm going to read the first 6 verses of chapter 11, and we're going to make our way all the way through the chapter, but not all in one shot. But I want to read the first 6 verses, and we're going to spend most of our time here. So if when I get to the rest of the passage, you're looking at the clock and wondering, how long is this going to go? Well, at that point, I'll be over half done, maybe even almost done, because I think it's really important to focus in on these first several verses here. So Hebrews 11, starting at verse 1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command. So what is seen was not made out of what was invisible. What was visible, sorry. By faith Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith he was commended as righteous, when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith Abel still speaks even though he is dead. By faith Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. All right. So the real reason I had you stand at the beginning of the message is because this is going to be a heavy one. So I wanted you to be a little more alert. This verse 1 of Hebrews 11, probably packs one of the most powerful punches in the whole Bible. It describes something so deep and so profound that I essentially wrote an entire other sermon that I'm not going to be sharing with you this morning because it's too technical. It's too detailed. And some of it is contained in my weekly letter, which I sent out, and I'm actually printed copies that are in the foyer. Because there is so much to understand about faith. It is hard to fit it all in one message. And so I'm going to keep this relatively focused. Faith is defined in verse 1 as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This powerful statement describes the typical pattern of faith. It starts with hope in something we do not see. And then we come to know with increasing certainty. We become persuaded about what we hope for through faith. And faith is not mere belief. It includes belief, but as I wrote in this week's letter, it includes action. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, there's copies. Please grab them. And if you're not subscribed to that, please subscribe. Just let me know. And because there's a lot of stuff I put in those letters that helps with the messages. And I need to maybe find another way to get that stuff out to you. But that's one way I'm doing it right now. And in that letter, I talk about faith being belief, but also trust. It's both. It's what we agree with, but it's also how we live. And Christian faith is not blind faith. We do not carry on our lives and blind hope that what we believe will eventually come true. Faith doesn't oppose knowledge. So you don't just blindly follow, ignorant of what's really going on, as Christians are often accused of by maybe the more rational or more logical so-called parts of the world. They tend to accuse Christians of being blind and ignorant about real things, but that's not what Christian faith is. Faith is a preview of knowledge. It doesn't oppose knowledge, it anticipates it. Like the song of a bird that announces the coming summer, which soon we will all long for. Faith reaches up toward heaven, sensing the shape of what will unfold, what is unfolding, even though it can't yet see the full details or explain them. This is what happened when Jesus first called his disciples. He said, "Follow me." Why would he expect them to follow him when they didn't even know him? He had no social standing. No one really knew who Jesus was until he started gaining followers. Jesus understood that his disciples had to walk with him first, that only through experience could they truly come to know him. So, he appealed not to their knowledge, but to their capacity for faith. This is God's call for us. Jesus asked them to offer the trust of their hearts, a trust that looks forward, like a promise. When a parent tells a child, "Trust me," there's usually something coming in the future that they're waiting for. There's a promise that they depend on. Jesus essentially said, "Walk with me, and I will show you the green pastures and the quiet waters of life." He extends that same invitation to us. But to experience that, you must walk with him before you fully understand. Understanding will not come until you actually walk with Jesus. Trust him with your devotion, even without proof. Give him the steady focus of your faith so that he can shape you in his image. Surrender your will completely so that it can become aligned with God's will. And when that happens, ultimately, when we are made new and in the presence of God, faith will no longer be needed. Faith will be fulfilled in sight, and you'll truly know him as he knows you. So the call is to give him your heart's trust, even for a short while, and he will return it to you with abundant understanding. I know this is true, and many of you know this is true as well. I know it's true because it is the story of my life. Offer your heart and faith, and he will give it back to you, filled with knowledge, the kind of knowledge that leads to eternal life. Then you will be able to say, "Once I believed, now I know for sure." In other words, faith demonstrated through actions is the manifestation of our hope. Every step we take in faith following Jesus is the manifestation of our hope. This means that faith is more than simply believing something to be true. Verse 3 says, "By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen is not made out of what was visible." The visible universe, everything we see here, was not made out of visible material. This is something even science points to. There's no explanation for what provided the very essence of reality. There's no way that you can fully understand that. It came from that which was not visible. The visible universe was not made out of visible material. It was called into being by God. This is a profound statement relating to verse 1. So just as God brought the visible into being from invisible things, from his very word, so when we act in faith on our hope in the future things to come, we are actually making the invisible visible. We are bringing the things of the kingdom into reality, into visible, tangible things, actions, relationships. When we act in faith, we are bringing the things of the kingdom to earth. We are mimicking God's act of creation when we live out our hope through faith, bringing something out of nothing. The faithful people we'll read about shortly lived as though the future was already present. They saw the promises of God as completely trustworthy, and they lived with them as their confident hope. Their faith is the evidence. In other words, their faith proved God's existence. How else will people know who God is unless we show them who God is? That's how God has decided to work. That is how he operates, through his image bearers. Just look at the two examples in these opening verses, Abel and Enoch. Abel, one of the first humans, he brought an offering to God that was acceptable. It was pleasing to God. He seemed to have a more intimate relationship with God than his brother Cain. In Genesis 4, verse 6, God asked Cain, Abel's brother, "Why are you angry?" See, Cain was jealous because God was accepting Abel's sacrifice. And God was not accepting Cain's sacrifice. He wasn't as pleased with Cain's sacrifice. And God says, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted?" So something about Abel's offering was more pleasing to God. Abel must have seen what Cain could not see. There must have been something that he could see. His faith enabled him to see. And Abel's sacrifice was acceptable not so much for its substance, but because it was an expression of Abel's devotion to God. And then next we have Enoch. Enoch, mysterious figure. A number of weeks ago I talked about Melchizedek. Melchizedek, very mysterious figure in the Bible. Enoch is another one of these very mysterious figures. There's books written about him that aren't in the Bible. There's books apparently written by Enoch that aren't in the Bible that we have historically have records of, and very mysterious. Apparently taken from earth before he died, and was said to have pleased God and never experienced death. God was so pleased with him, he just took him. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We didn't have to go through that painful process, that hard process. Enoch did, apparently. But the point of mentioning Enoch here is to say that he was commended as one who pleased God. How can we know this? How can we know he pleased God, that he walked with God? Why is this such a big deal? You see, Enoch lived in the time before the flood. So if you read kind of the first 11 chapters of Genesis, and you get kind of toward the end of that section, you start to see that evil was consuming the earth. People were becoming increasingly evil. And Enoch lived in those years. And it says that Enoch walked with God faithfully. So in the midst of, you think our world is evil now. It was probably much, much worse. And Enoch walked with God faithfully. And he was commended for that. Hebrews 11 verse 6 says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. Why? Because faith is the evidence that your life is built upon God's promises, that your hope is truly in the things to come. So let's continue reading Hebrews 11 and see what faith meant for the people listed here and discover the true object of our hope. And I'm going to read from verse 7 to 31. So this is a long section. And if you've been here if you were here through the Pentateuch series, we covered almost all of these stories. And it tells basically the whole story of God's people in this section. So Hebrews 11, verse 7 to 31. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children, because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he is as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died, and they did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so, in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. a lot of examples of faith. By faith, these people obeyed God, and by obeying God, they gave witness to their hope. Noah was told to build an ark, and he believed God's promise that he would need that ark in order to save him and his family. So he built an ark. It wasn't rational, made no sense, but God said to do it. Abraham was told to go to an unknown land, and that if he did, God would make him and his descendants into a great nation. So he went. Moses was told to go and rescue God's people, and that God would give him what he needed in order to do that. So he went. They lived as though what was promised to them was already theirs. They lived as though what was promised to them was already theirs. That's what gave them the power to move forward. Verse 10 and verse 16 is where I want to draw our attention to as that which propels us forward, that which propelled these people forward. These are often overlooked verses in this passage. As it was the case for me as I came to this, and as I studied it, I realized that this whole passage points us toward a key idea that even all these people way back from the beginning, they saw this. Verse 10 says, Abraham was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Interesting. If you read the stories, there's not really mention of a city. So what's this author talking about? Verse 16. They, being Abraham and Sarah and their sons, were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. So they were promised a land that they would inherit, that God would give them. Everyone believed that this was the land of Canaan. Everybody believed that. There was no doubt. The idea that they were looking past Canaan isn't really explicit in the Bible anywhere. And then you come to this verse and it says, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Not Canaan, something beyond Canaan. Therefore, because they were looking forward to this heavenly country, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Looking forward to next week's message and sort of the rest of the Hebrews. We only have a couple messages left. In Hebrews 12, verse 22, it says, "You have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem." That is our hope. That is our hope. That was their hope. The idea of a future city now comes as a main theme in these last chapters of Hebrews. An unexpected turn like this. I didn't see this coming. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but that's where we're headed. So we've been building up to this point. Draw near to God. Where will we draw near to God? Well, right now it's through faith. But one day it will be in his city that he's preparing. The author draws our attention to the promise that God made to Abraham and his descendants, the promise of a kingdom that would be ruled by God. Not an earthly kingdom, at least not in this present version of the earth, but in the new heavens, in the new earth that God is preparing. The author makes a connection between that promise of a kingdom and the deeper reality that was becoming clear to the first Christians. As Jesus, the Messiah, came and died and ascended into heaven, it was becoming clear that the promise that the Messiah would usher in a new kingdom was not going to be fulfilled in the establishment or the renewal of the ancient city of Jerusalem, with the rebuilding of the glory of Israel. The promise is yet to be fulfilled in the new Jerusalem, which God is preparing for his people. The city that will descend from heaven and land on earth like a spaceship. It seems not like nonsense, but that's the image we're given in the Bible. In Revelation 21 and 22, it speaks of a new Jerusalem coming down from heaven to earth. And this is where God's people will be with him, where we can draw near to him. The faith of those listed in this chapter is based on the certainty of a future in which God is the perfect ruler over a perfect kingdom. And this is what propelled them forward, despite so many challenges. They took God and his promises seriously, living with confidence in God's ability to do what he said he will do. Let's read the final section of chapter 11 and receive a challenge for us today. So this is verse 32 to 40. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith. Yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Chapter 12 will go on to say, which we'll look at next week. Therefore, since we are surrounded by this great crowd of witnesses, do not grow weary and lose heart. This takes us back to the beginning of Hebrews, and the reason for this letter in 2 verse 1, it says, we must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. The whole letter is a call to keep fixing our eyes on Jesus, on the promises of God, on the city of the living God that we will one day inhabit, where we will draw near to God fully, completely, not with faith, but with seeing and feeling, hearing. The world around us is full of distractions, messages that pull our eyes down and away from God and toward the troubles and empty promises of this world. Our hope is not in our money, our possessions, or the promises made by politicians, or any earthly inheritance. Our hope is in the living God. The people of faith in Hebrews 11 demonstrated their hope by their faith by living as though God's promises are already theirs. They are living into God's promises. They believed that God was making a new world in which everything would be better. They were living by faith in God's future world while society all around them was living as though the present world is all there was and is. And God was giving them strength to live like that. They were, in their own lives and sufferings, living beacons of hope, pointers to the fact that the God who had made the world was intending to remake it, and that they were the early witnesses of that great moment. We too can be witnesses to God's remaking of creation by the way we live. We do not wait idly. We do not sit around waiting for the day when that will happen. As people whose eyes are fixed on the hope of all things being made right, we can participate in God's renewing of things, in God's making things right. We can live with the love and the generosity of God's kingdom, as we are even today as we give gifts to local people in need and children around the world. We can be people of generosity, that are made up of the things of God's kingdom. Not worried about all the terrible things happening all around us, but responding to those things. Responding to a broken world with faith, and as beacons pointing people to the true hope of the world, which is Jesus Christ. I want to read a little bit of the closing song that we're going to sing. We're going to sing this song, and then I'm going to come back and I want to read from Psalm 145, which can be our prayer as we go. But I want to read these two verses in the chorus from this song. This song was written by Keith and Kristen Getty, and it's based on Hebrews 11. By faith we see the hand of God in the light of creation's grand design, in the lives of those who prove his faithfulness, who walk by faith and not by sight. By faith our fathers roamed the earth with the power of his promise in their hearts, of a holy city built by God's own hand. A place where peace and justice reign. That is our hope. We will stand as children of the promise. We will fix our eyes on him, our soul's reward. Till the race is finished and the work is done, we'll walk by faith and not by sight. Let's sing.